Oops,
Ha!
that was loud.
Yeah, it's up loud because my hearing's gone a bit.
Did you? I'm just going to pause it for a moment. So, hey Keith, how you doing?
I'm okay, Aaron. How are you?
Good, thank you. This is our first podcast because recently, up till now, well, we've been talking. How many years have we been talking for, Keith?
What was it, 14, 15 years?
14, 15 years. Yep. And we've, how many videos? I don't even know how many videos we've put up on YouTube. Quite a few. So we've decided to do the podcast thing instead. So it's more easy to listen to and you don't have to look at our ugly mugs. So what you'll notice as you're listening to this, there will be, every now and then there'll be a lag because for some reason between where I'm in Christchurch and where Keith is in Sydney, there is often a lag. So our video stops, but the voices keep going, but for some reason it interrupts us slightly because we can't see what's going on at the other end. And a lot of our conversation does actually rely upon seeing each other. However, we hope that this podcast will be useful. Anything that we say in this podcast, obviously, is not meant to be a cure, a remedy, prescription, or psychological or psychiatric or whatever the hell you want to call it. What do you call it? It's a conversation between two guys who have been doing NLP for at least 25, 30 years each. And today, I believe, Keith, we're talking about abundance.
Starting off with a big one.
Starting off with a big one. We don't go small, we always go big. And what you'll notice is we'll go in and out from meta or epic or macro, and we'll go down to micro. We'll chunk it, and then we'll go meta, and then we'll chunk it. And why has abundance come up lately for us? And specifically, I think you were the one, Keith, who kind of initiated the whole abundance conversation. Do you want to? And what we're going to do is, like, sometimes we might dig deep. So once again, anything we say is with respect to the conversation, but every now and then there might be something relating to very personal stuff. What we've decided to do is we will go to a certain degree of depth in that. And if we feel we need to go deeper, then we will go into what we call non-content conversation, which means we will not talk about the specifics of who, where, why, and what, or all that stuff. What we like to call neighbours, Shortland Street or Coronation Street. We will get into the structure of the conversation rather than the content. Hope that makes sense. So back to abundance. You brought it up and fire away.
I brought it up. As we've discussed many times, I think you, like me, we're constantly looking for what's the simplest answer, what's the simplest approach, and just looking around. Well, my own personal experience and looking around the world, I was trying to find what's motivating depression and anxiety and just fear for the future. And I just reduced it. You know, I'm always open to being corrected on this, and I just enjoy exploring it. I reduced it down to abundance or scarcity, and abundance sounds like a new age word, but I think it's quite appropriate. Um, for me, universe is, and I don't even have any, um, I don't want to use hyperbole. It is abundant, full stop. And we humans have this amazing ability to convince ourselves that it's not. And so I bring it back to fear and depression, anxiety, any sort of mental or emotional challenges, I was wondering, is it about fundamentally abundance or scarcity? So I'll just give you a silly scenario. Let's say I've got food in my belly, I've got people around me that care for me, the sun's shining, things are good. Am I going to be fearful? Am I going to be worried about the future? Am I going to feel like I'm disconnected from my fellow man? Now compare that to being painfully hungry. Don't have a roof over my head. It's pouring down rain. You know, all I've got are the clothes on my back. How much do I have left over to care about, anyone else, let alone myself?
Hmm.
I know that might sound simplistic, but I thought this might be worth exploring. Everything that I see going on in the world, everything I see in my life, I'm wondering if it comes down to these very, very simple.
Well, I mean, there's that Occam's razor principle, isn't it? That if you shave away all of the bits and pieces and the extras, you get to a fundamental truth or answer. And I think it's interesting because we look back over the last 3 to 4 years as a metaphor for what you're talking about, fear and anxiety, depression, a rise in all the markers of mental and or physical
Yes.
illness.
Yes.
What was the fundamental thing that we're told to do or instructed to do, and if we didn't, then certain things we would not have access to. And even then, if we did do it, we still didn't have access, like, not talking, 2 meter distance, not talking to people on the street, having a mask, all those sorts of things. And these are kind of metaphors of division, and metaphors of disallowing the natural and historically essential requisites for human and societal, community, cultural health.
Mm.
And
so are they also metaphors for scarcity? That's what I'm curious.
exactly. And so
Let's take away these certain freedoms. Seriously, my freedom is freedom. You can't take a freedom away.
yeah.
So, hence my question: is it about scarcity?
Well, I mean, in terms of that, well, I mean, yes, we could choose the labels, and yet, as you said at the beginning, it's like, well, if I have, food in my belly, blah blah blah, all these different things, I feel abundant, and I have abundance, then I'm less likely to have the issues with my mental, emotional, physical stuff.
Mm.
However, there are people, and I've met many, who had and still have an aspect of what we'd call material abundance. And yet, something got under their skin over the last 3 to 4 years, and there's this feeling of scarcity, which is driven by, I guess, fear, worry, anxiety, and also the kind of the easily triggered residuals of the last 3 to 4 years, having to go through certain experiences that they really didn't want to have to go through.
Mm. Yes.
And so abundance is, and it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there are many examples of people who have incredible abundance, and they are constantly, there's this great story of the guy, I don't know his name, but he's got this organization called Billions for Change. Or was it Millions for Change, maybe billions? But he made a fortune out of just a supplement shot drink you could buy at supermarkets in LA. And he had no idea how well it would go. It would just went gangbusters. And so he produced more and more. And then, but his decision was to put pretty much most of his profits into developing solutions for medical, for third world countries, i.e. water desalination, all sorts of different things that were extremely unique. And he in Arizona, he owns acres and acres of land with all of these warehouses on, and he just spends all day driving around these warehouses to check on these incredible inventors designing all these crazy things, and many of them are being successfully used in different contexts. And he keeps making money and then putting that money back into R&D to make better stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some would argue that Elon Musk does that in some of the areas that he's working in, and these people have a significant amount of money. What many of us consider to be called abundance.
Yeah. They're not coming from a place of fear.
No, they don't have any fear that they're going to lose their abundance.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
If anything, they've completely embraced the universal law that there will be ups and downs, and yet keep creating, and abundance will keep coming.
Yeah.
And as Tony Robbins would say, make your dream absolutely ridiculously huge. And notice what happens. So the chances are the universe is more likely to listen to that than, I just want to get through the week. I just want to pay the rent this week, which is actually, not wanting to make light of that, is actually extremely difficult for some people, and many people actually, and has been for myself in the past. So, yeah. So abundance and scarcity. How much of these two things are actually, firstly, wired into our cultural narrative, and how much of these things are up for our own restructuring? How much of this are they beliefs? Are they beliefs that we can change culturally and personally?
It's interesting that you bring up these people who make enormous amounts of money and yet feed it back into creative projects. So that's one mindset, and there's another mindset that could be multiple mindsets, but there's another mindset that says, I have some, and now I've got to keep it safe. I've got to make more, and I've got to keep it accumulating.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily doing creative things with it, but they're certainly hoarding and trying to make their money make money. Different mindset. And my curiosity is whether they're motivated by fear of loss.
Yeah.
I have all of this and I don't want to lose it.
There's an interesting subtext to that, because over the last 4 years, I was involved in some groups, kind of involved or like fascinated by what was going on, which are these prepping outfits, these groups of people who get together. And it was really interesting because if you look back through, not too ancient history, and also certain cultures around the world, certainly in the upper northern hemisphere, the lower southern hemispheres, where mostly the northern hemisphere of Europe and those sorts of places, where they actually have to prep, they have to gather, they have to, and it's a mixture of resources. It might be, food, it might be actual monetary, so that when they get into the winter months, or they get into a place where there is a flood or whatever it is, which happens regularly for them, but they're not sure when or how, or they have prepped, and they don't have the attitude necessarily of fear. They have the attitude of well, why wouldn't you? You know, in summer, or in, summer, there is this proliferation of fruit. So what they do is they make a considerable amount of storage to store what we'd call preserves or whatever. And I've got a dear friend who goes hunting. He's got 2 massive freezers full of, meat and fish and vegetables. And that's because he's got a large family. But I mean, the fundamental thing is, he says, well, that makes sense because I can't go hunting and I need to do these things to feed my large family because I can't afford to go to the supermarket every week. But I can afford, he only needs 4 bullets and he's got 2 deer, and it's like, it's a hell of a walk. And, and he spends 2 days doing the business on the meat, but, he's got a winter, if not 8-10 months of food sitting in the freezer at any one time.
Wow.
Which is, if he was going to buy that at the supermarket, you're talking venison, he's talking $400 or $500 worth of food minimum. He gives a lot away. So, there's this, and he doesn't do it out of fear. He does it out of, well, this is my life. This is necessity. This is how I do it. And the world is abundant. So this is what I do. And many of these cultures in the Northern Hemispheres, they believe in the same thing. There is, of course, an underlying aspect that if they don't, they die. So it's like, if we don't do this, well, we're cooked. But that I don't think is the driver. And also, this is also where culture, I think, comes in, is there's a cultural awareness that this is how we do life. And there's an abundance in nature to provide for us at the sunny seasons that will look after us during the aching cold. I mean, in some places it's minus 30. It's like, seriously, you don't go outside.
Yeah.
Beasties are looking for you. you know I've got a friend who's I've been foraging with for mushrooms. It was fascinating. She told us a story. So I found a mushroom and she said, "Oh, for the love of God, don't eat that." I said, "Wow." She said, "Well, we eat in Russia." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "But the process to make it edible is long, takes a couple of months. You've got to soak, you've got to do." And I said, "How many people died to work this out?" It was like, it wasn't like, a channeled thing where suddenly someone, "Oh no, I know how to do this because I'm channeling some," it was literally people must have died,
Yeah.
But if you've got nothing else and coming out of this icy tundra is a mushroom, you're going to do whatever. But I mean, people must have died waiting for it to go through the, it's a stupid story, but it's actually real. She told me the story.
Yeah.
So luckily in our part of the world, here in New Zealand and you in Australia, we don't have that problem. However, we have had situations where it's just happened in America, actually, where, what was it, Walmart, one of these things, Aldi, had, they had a truckload of eggs turned up in the last 15 minutes, lasted 15 minutes, and they were gone, like a couple of truckloads of freaking eggs, because people just took the eggs. They bought them, but they didn't have like a limit on how many you could have. From Newton. I don't know what they're going to do, but they would have dried. I mean, in our, I'm going on a little bit, but in our pantry, we've got preserved eggs. It's fascinating. You just put the egg in the shell in a mixture of lime and water, and we've eaten them 6 months later because we've got
Seriously?
chickens. Seriously, and it's literally, you can bake with them. You can
You put
boil them.
the whole
Whole
egg in the
egg
shell,
in
in
the
a
shell,
mixture of
in a
lime and
mixture
water.
of lime and water. And I think it's, my wife does it. She did the investigation through this prepping group. And seriously, mate, when our chickens are, off the lay, which they do, we've got a jar full of eggs. And there's 40 odd eggs in the jar.
No way.
Yeah, really? Why? So it's like, so I guess, and that's because, well, a part of the reason we did it was we were curious. And we also knew that the chickens will go off the lay at some point. Well, sometimes they produce, we've got 3 trays of 12 eggs. So we've got 36 eggs just sitting there right now. So we could actually, knowing that they're going to go off the lay again, we could actually just make another jar of eggs.
Mm.
So you know, you get where I'm coming from. It's not necessarily, it's not a fear for us. It's just, well, make use of the existing abundance so that that abundance continues through time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Well, in extreme locations, extreme differences between summer and winter, it just means that you know, generationally, you know what your environment is going to produce.
Yes.
So
Yes.
summer is an opportunity to prepare for a time when it's not so productive. That makes
Yes.
sense. It just means you're living within the means of your environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's something that got me and many people because I set up a group to help people through COVID. You know, I set up a group. I think you came along once or twice when you came to New Zealand, and I remember you sitting there in quite an astounded state with what was being shared. But I mean, fundamentally, what came to mind just then was, how do we define abundance on a personal level? And what I've noticed over the last, number of years through our conversations, actually, because you brought it up originally, and I kind of reframed it into, how often do we recognize the abundance of our history, our personal history, and our personal memory? Give you an example. So what came up for me was there were some people in the group who are really struggling with what was happening. They've been mandated out of their work because they decided to make their own decisions about their medical autonomy. And so they mandated out, and ironically, nurses, and they were mandated out. And they found it really difficult. And I said to them, well, when in the past have you, for whatever reason and whatever the context, when did you have an experience where someone just said no and you couldn't have a conversation with them about it? And they said, well, yeah. And one of them was a family thing. One of them was a, no, we can't go there thing. One of them was a school thing. One of them was, there were all these different examples where no, the big no was, and they couldn't kind of justify it in their own heads. It couldn't make sense. And then I said to them, well, did that come to an end? Did that pass? And they said, yeah. And I said, what was that like when you were finally on the other side of that? It's that kind of Buddhist thing, this too shall pass.
Mm.
But the fundamental thing is, when you're in the middle of it, when you're up to your earlobes in it, there's no abundance. There's no sense of, oh yeah, I've been in this kind of situation before, different context, different kind of scenario, but I've been in this context before, and it actually came to pass. And that when you're in the middle of something, certainly in the middle of an illness even, or the flu even, or and worst case scenario, a major illness, or major break in your skeletal system or something like that because you've had an accident, it's hard to remember that the body does actually, with some help, know what to do. It knows what to do. And at some point I will go, wow, thank goodness that's over. Or I'll go, wow, that thing's not hurting anymore. It's that delight and surprise concept that we've talked about a huge amount. And I think, there's an abundance in our psychobiological memory. And the abundance is that at some point in my history, hundreds of times in my history, I've gone, oh, look, that scar has healed up. Or, and I'll go, wow, that's, wow. And then I'll move on.
Yeah.
But in the middle of it, when it's itchy or bleeding or it's hurting or whatever, I'm not able to access that necessarily.
This is the fascinating thing. I mean, what you're saying, we're here right now, which means we've succeeded.
We are
Whatever happened
always
previously,
succeeding. We
we've
are
always
always
succeeded.
Yeah, always. We never stop
This
succeeding.
is what fascinates me about what you're saying. Given that we have our very existence right now and we're breathing, means we have succeeded.
Yep.
Multiple, I mean, countless times, and yet a personal crisis right now, and we fall to pieces.
Yeah.
And I go, oh no, what do I do? And yet,
Well, we don't know what to do. Sorry to interrupt, but here's the
no.
thing.
I want you to, because given that we're having this discussion, if in this moment I don't know what to do, how is it that I'm this disconnected from the fact that I have
Well, because
all of these resources, all of this abundance of knowledge and successes.
well, do you
What's
think
happening
it's
in the moment?
because you're in a generalized state? And here's the thing, the mind does this thing, regardless of where the mind might be positioned or where it might live. Even culturally, the cultural mind does this thing. It generalizes. So the pain that I'm feeling at this point is generalizing itself. So it's generalizing itself. It's influencing my neurology. My neurology is like, I'm trying to feel happy while I'm sad. I can't. I can't do it. So it's like, I can't do two opposing things. So if I'm in pain, it's really difficult to feel epiphany. It's really difficult. But momentarily, I will go, wait a minute. The pain is eased. Now it always eases. It's never constant. We can't do constant as a human biological. We think we will generalize that we've been in constant pain, but we haven't. We can't, because you're asleep. At some point, you'll fall asleep, whether it's because the pain is so incredible, you just go into a freaking, death-like sleep to get away from it. Or if you suddenly have a moment of transcendence, where you go inside, whether through mindfulness or whatever, whether it's initiated by yourself,
or you're simply distracted in the
or you're
moment.
simply distracted. And that, as we've discussed many times, I used to do clown doctoring. I walked into a room with a kid who had broken his femur. He was screaming his head off. His mum was bawling her eyes out next to him. I walk in and stand at the end of the bed, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I'm waiting until he realizes that there's someone in the room. And at some point, he looked up, and he suddenly realized there's this weirdo dressed in a white kind of clowny suit with a red nose, just standing there, just wondering what to do next. And not going into the rest of the story, but fundamentally, it was, and at that moment, he stopped crying. He queried. His curiosity was immediately taken, and he goes, and he said nothing. He just sort of looked at me, and his mum stopped crying because she suddenly realized that he's not crying. And I remember it clearly. I said, well, because I did not remember in clown state, you have no idea, because you're a different personality. I am a different personality in that state, all that sort of stuff. So I was zippy the clown. So everything I do is just mental and zippy. I said, I don't think you're crying loud enough. You need to cry much louder, like seriously, like this. And I scream like this. And he just started smiling. It was weird. But in that moment, and then I said, by the way, how's your other leg? How's your other leg?
How's your other leg?
How's your other leg? And it just all came spontaneously. I mean, that is actually a line from a famous, Milton Erickson hypnotherapist and NLP, foundational NLP kind of guy. But fundamentally, it was like, how's your other leg? And it was just weird because I had no idea what I was going to do. But what I'm getting at was like, that's the beauty of clowning, of course, and that's the beauty of satire and the beauty of humor is go broad, go wide, go into extreme. It's just jokes, folks. Go into that kind of realm, and then people open up their ability to conceive of something outside of this generalization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and that's where we find abundance.
I like that.
Yeah, and we can't do scarcity in that moment. When we're laughing, we can't do scarcity. It's impossible. Because it's neurologically impossible to do something called scarcity when we're in the abundance of laughter and our whole body is belly laughing, or we're in that open, curious state of like, wow, didn't expect that. And so that's what I was wondering. Like, in the moment of generalization of I'm in this shitty state, I'm in this mandated state, or I'm in this, weird state, or whatever it is. My generalization is, well, that's it. And that's kind of how we kind of tend to function as humans. And I'm wondering, is part of our exploration of new consciousness actually exploring our capacity to effortlessly move out of that, or at least challenge it? Wait a minute, I'm generalizing. Yes. Wait a minute, I'm generalizing. I'm generalizing this. Wait a minute. I think I've forgotten that there is abundance here. And how do I know that? Because I've experienced this a million times.
Yeah. So what do you think is perhaps the first step? If I'm stuck in the moment. I mean, my femur's not broken, but I could be stuck in a state where I feel I have nothing. I feel everything's been taken away. I feel, well, where do I go with that? What do you think might be the very first step?
Oh, well, I would go
as an
back.
individual, and as an individual, are we supposed to be able to do this on our own? Are we,
Well, I
are we
think
waiting
that's
for a group or another?
no. I
To,
think that's our job. I think that's our job. Our job is, and I think it maybe goes back to, that old psychotherapeutic stuff, Rogerian stuff, which is, I mean, from what I understand, and I'm going to be generalizing and I'm going to be minimizing, and excuse me to any psychology people or Rogerians out there or whatever. But fundamentally, my kind of very, very specific and chunk down take on the Rogerian thing is reflective listening as a part of how he worked. So Carl Rogers. So fundamentally, and that's what rapport building, which is what NLP kind of amongst a million other things took out of Rogerian therapy. And that was, well, it was extremely successful because in some situations he'd just literally go, okay, so what you're feeling is, okay, so what you're telling me is, blah, 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 blah. And then that person would suddenly hear their own story back. And they'd suddenly hear it, because up to that point, it's just been this unconscious pattern that they keep processing, and it just digs deeper, and the neurology gets broader, starts to generalizing, and it starts to be the filter through which they see their entire existence. And so he just kept, in general, because I've been pulled up about this, thanks very much, whoever you were, but fundamentally, it really made life quite challenging on Facebook. Thanks not. But anyway, in this instant, Rogerian therapy does, the person can, but does not always, person can suddenly hear their own story back, and they go, wait a minute, and they pop out, because they're hearing the reflection of their own internal story. And it's almost like they go what we'd call meta to themselves. They sort of pop out because they're literally hearing their own story, and they're going, well, wait a minute, that sounds maybe ridiculous, or maybe I keep repeating myself, don't I? Or whatever it is. So the answer to your question is, what if I just start to acknowledge the fact that this is the state I'm in? And Rogerian did it without any judgment whatsoever. And he had no idea, as far as I understand, where it would go. Of course, he'd had enough experience to know that it kind of can go in certain directions, and he was ready for that. And then that's where the other million-fold layers of Rogerian therapy come in, I guess. So fundamentally, though, it was kind of a sense of, well, how do I reflect upon my own state? Well, first, I've got to acknowledge that state.
Okay, well, let's. I want to explore this distinction. If you have another who's actually listening to your story and reflecting it back to you,
without judgment, without narrative, without anything, just, okay, so blah, 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 blah.
I think we've all had the experience of suddenly going, oh, wow, I'm hearing my story not from myself, but from someone else. So there could be multiple factors here. The two that come to mind are, it's someone else's voice. That's a difference.
Yep.
And for want of a better word, there's an injection of care. If someone's listening, there's I can assume some level of care. Now,
yeah, I'm just gonna throw a little spanner.
Yeah.
So the spanner is, they did it with AI. So they got an AI, and they put a face to the AI, just a very ordinary looking woman, and kind of like middle, maybe late 20s, early 30s, nicely looking. And then her job was literally on the screen to reflect back. So the stats, I can't remember them exactly, but they were over 70% of the feedback from the people who did this form of therapy with the AI robotic face on the screen that looked very as real as you could at the time, was that they came away going, wow, that was really helpful.
Mm.
There was no intention behind that replication of a human with a human voice. However, it was implicit that this whole thing existed, this research study, for care. Get the
Yeah.
The thing
Well,
is,
it's how someone perceives it. If there's a perception of I'm being heard, I'm being cared for.
Yep.
So that's huge. So this is what I'm exploring. We've got that experience of another. So now your mind is made up of two. As an individual, you're suggesting the first thing I can do is acknowledge my experience. How is that different to the repetitive thinking that I can do to keep myself?
The acknowledgement is that, it's kind of like, it's a good question. It's kind of deciding to do it with, I guess, how would I phrase it? So, from the three-step fascination concept that I worked, did years ago, which was, well, okay, in the first instance, it's like it's an acknowledgement that this exists, and in that is implicit that I'm doing it. So it's not, so I'm looking out the window.
That's a leap. That's going to be a leap for a lot of people.
Yeah, and
which is good.
That's the leap that's required, is that I'm doing how I'm feeling. So, the cultural narrative is that, well, this has been done to me. Yes. So I've been offended, or I've been hurt, or you hurt me, or you make me feel, or you said this, and so I'm you made me feel angry, or whatever it is. It's usually implicit in the cultural norm, the Shortland Street, or the Coronation Street, is that you've made me feel bad.
Yeah.
So
circumstances have made me feel bad. Yeah.
Exactly. I've got the flu. That means something out there in the air has made me feel sick. So, it's also implicit in symptomologies. I broke my leg because I was doing this. This accident I had has made me feel pain. And to a degree, absolutely true. We live in a world of context, and we live in a world where we are in constant relationship and communication with our context, whether it's, real or, whatever, human or otherwise. And so, but the essence of the next step is, well, how come that guy's standing next to me and apparently there's this flu and yet hasn't got it? And then a whole bunch of people say, well, that's because, yeah, but whatever. In the end, we are told constantly that flu is coming to, I know what it was. Remember when they said, well, if you're sitting at a restaurant, you don't need to wear a mask. But if you get up to go to the toilet, you have to wear your mask, because the COVID only works when you're standing up. Yeah. So that must be how that's explained. So this guy next to me must have been standing up at the time, and I don't know. But what I'm saying is, well, okay, so at some point I've got to maybe make the leap of faith, in the sense that I'm the one who's doing the symptomology.
Yeah.
No one else is doing it for me. No one is doing the pain.
Aaron, this is huge. So hopefully we can unpack this.
Yeah. So no one's doing it for me. Like, okay, so I had an accident on my scooter, and, I ended up on my back, and I'm lying there laughing because I'm going, well, helmet's great. But I smashed my toes. So my toes are still hurting and smashed up for 2 months. And they were, munted. But they're good now. It's amazing. They just grew back. It's just amazing. Anyways, kind of grew back. They're still a bit numb in places. But the accident happened in less than 5 seconds. Like, literally, the person changed lane, and I'm Superman, and I'm landing on my back. It was literally 5 seconds max. Oh, I didn't really notice that you were there. Okay, good. Anyway, long and short of it is, after that time, the accident wasn't still happening. but my toes were still sore.
Mm.
For 2 months, the outside of I could review the accident, but that didn't make my toes sore or more painful. So the accident still wasn't happening. So the thing that was happening to me, which lasted 5 seconds, was gone. And even today, if I put my toe on the floor, which I can now, it's numb at the end. So the accident isn't happening, and this is 2 years later. So, okay, but my toe is still numb. Okay, I'm doing that. So I'm doing that. And even if I'm not doing the fact that it's numb, I'm doing the feedback to recognize that it's numb. So the second part is I go, wow, that's fascinating. I'm doing the symptom. Yeah, and I'm aware
This
that
is quite a leap. I mean, considering
is,
what goes on in society, people hold on to depression and anxiety for years.
Yeah, but the part of that is, do they consciously choose to hold on to it? I don't think so. Some traumas, having had depression in the past, some traumas laid down a neurological map that's pretty hard to move.
I'm
you do a
totally
good. Well, you can talk about that for yourself. I mean, you're in a war zone and something happens. You're going to be laying down some pretty heavy, significant mental, emotional, physical experiences, and they're going to map themselves deep because we're designed to stay away from that shit. We're designed to kind of avoid feeling bad, because fundamentally we're not designed to feel bad. We're designed to use that to move us towards good. As Tony Robbins said with Jordan Peterson just weeks ago, he says, well, what's your pull? Most people are just push away from this, push away from that. What's your pull? What's the thing that drives you meaningfully? Well, at a deep level, unless you're kind of wired a little bit screwy, at a deep level, our pull is joy. Our pull is abundant experience. Listen, I'm talking a lot, but I mean, how many, just that experience. Well, just that experience with the young man who broke his femur. His mum started laughing. I mean, she'd spent the last hour and a half crying. She was literally out of tears. And he's just screaming the whole time. You could hear him 2 wards away. And suddenly, because there's something unusual and kind of quirky happening, it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, so you tell me that we're mapped for misery or mapped for joy, fundamentally. Yeah.
My fascination is, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not supposed to be doing this on our own. I know I've kept on with the question of what can I do in the moment? Am I supposed to be doing it on my own? Am I supposed
in this instance, you are, because you're the only one who's aware of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
You're the only one.
Yeah.
There's no one else unless you tell them, and they might not be around. So you're the only one, and that's the hard stuff. I mean,
This is the hard bit. Well, what's if I'm up to my neck in it? What's the strategy? I guess this comes back to prepping. What can I do beforehand in case of situations like this where I don't have to rely on my conscious resources in the moment? There could be something that can actually stimulate me in the moment, because I've already.
Well, you have that. You've had that, and we all have that, and that is a moment. You've had many moments where you go, wait a minute, I don't like how this feels.
Yeah.
Well, that's your doorway.
I don't like how this feels.
I just don't like how this feels. Why would you ask that question? Because you're driven by abundance. Putting it in your vernacular, I'm driven by abundance, and in this moment, I'm not feeling abundance. I don't like how this feels. So in that moment, you go, well, what is the feeling? I'm feeling really depressed. Okay, I don't like this. Okay, and yet I'm doing it.
So it's different to just being in the state, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually an inquiry, a comment about the state.
Yeah.
Is this the first step? Is this the first step? Is this something I can prepare myself for? Go.
Everyone has the experience at some point where they go, man, I don't like how this is feeling. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's just constant.
That's different to actually just not enjoying what you're experiencing. because it's a comment about it.
Yeah.
That's the fascination.
But we all do it at some point, don't we? Because we're not actually wired to feel miserable all the time. Otherwise, we would. We'd just stay miserable.
I like that, because let's call it the abundance principle. We're actually wired to experience abundance.
Well, I think there's a lot of forgive me, but once again, whoever the person is, she's going to have a crack at me if she even bothers to listen to this. But there is apparently, and actually, Jordan Peterson and Tony Robbins were talking about it last week, and whether you like those two guys or not is irrelevant in this instance, because Tony Robbins managed to get a major university in the US to do a very long and very complicated study to prove this stuff. Full stop. And it worked, and it's provable. Research study, triple blind, the whole bullshit. So if you're really struggling with this information, you just find Jordan Peterson talks to Tony Robbins, and they give you the name of the research. I don't have it at my fingertips. Yeah. Maybe I should. But it's important stuff, because one thing about Jordan Peterson is he's anal retentive about research, because he's a research psychologist. And he's been dragged through everything lately in the last 10 years because of his stance on certain things. Great. It's made him go, oh, I don't like how this feels. And in that, he's gone, I know my abundance, and my ability is to research the living shit out of just about anything you give me. And he will. Even Christianity, for the love of God, he's done that. Excuse the pun. But fundamentally, he's done that, And so back to that thing. So my take on this is, well, it's a double meta statement, actually. If we get into the technique, is that every now and then we go, I don't like how this feels, and then we go, oh, wait a minute, I've just had this awareness, and we all have it. And so what we could throw in there is this attitude of curiosity. And in that, we say, well, wait a minute. There's a number of questions we can ask in that moment. It's like, because in that moment of curiosity, we can connect with personal historic abundance. And that is, well, wait a minute. I've had symptomologies before. Some have been extreme. Some have been not so. Some have been minor. But there's one truth. I am still alive. Now you bring that little puppy in, give it a wee cuddle for a moment. I'm still alive. Immediately, a part of your cortisol or whatever it is just going to start dropping, because there's a part of you that's actually wondering, am I going to survive this? It's just a biological fact. Look it up. It's science.
It's a very good point. Am I going to survive this?
Yeah, well, that's the fundamental. The pain is so extreme, and I don't know if I'm going to. But we even say this. I don't know if I'm going to get through it. Well, wait a minute. You're still alive, which means you've gotten through a broken bone, you've gotten through a loss of marriage, you've gotten through these different things, you've gone through bankruptcy, you've gone through this. My house burnt down when I was 8. Got through it, survived. All these different things. So these are markers historically, unless you've been brought up in a vacuum, mollycoddled with cotton wool all your life. Seriously, you've got benchmark experiences where you can literally say, wait a minute, I've survived. I'm, and it doesn't even matter how old you are, because even at 8 or 9, if someone is able to take you through this at this young age, you've got benchmark experiences where you made an absolute mountain out of a molehill. You thought you'd never get through this birthday where no one gave you a decent present. And you thought your life was coming to an end. Stupid as that sounds, but as a child, that's monumental, because it means no one loves you.
I'm absolutely astonished by little kids who go through bullying, and they make it to the end of the day. I'm just, how do you do that? That is remarkable. They just experience soul destroying things. Other little kids picking on them, saying really nasty things, and you got through to the end of the day, and you're going to do it all again tomorrow. I never ceases to amaze me
and at some point they'll find a resource, or at some point someone will say something.
It's already operating, isn't it? Because they're still moving. They can be crying,
Yeah.
they can be sad, but they're still moving forward. And you think, wow, tap into that.
Well, see, there's your answer. So that's the answer. But and we'll come full 180 is what we're talking about. Is you ask the question, why? Why don't we? Well, it's because we are kind of attuned through culture, nurture that this is big. This is huge. This is, and our mentors, our archetypes, our parents, whatever it is, family or otherwise a community, we model off them. And when we see the modeling, we go, oh man, this is, oh my God, this is huge. It's like, oh my God, we even learn how to feel bad when someone else is feeling bad. And it's not even our stuff. I mean, that's empathy, that's compassion, that sort of stuff, but it's still not my stuff. It's just not my stuff. But I don't know
it
that.
allows for communication, I think.
Yeah, well, it does, and that's
relating.
potentially, possibly the mirror neuron stuff and all that sort of carry on. But yeah, and then the next step after that, there's a kind of well, I'm feeling this symptomology. Well, this is fascinating because in a sense I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to myself, because then the new age question comes in, oh, well, why, what do they call it? Self-sabotage. I hate that commonality. It's like, we're not wired to hurt ourselves. Yeah. We're wired to try to wake ourselves up. That's kind of how we're wired. So we'll manifest shit, or we'll manifest repeating patterns, or we'll maybe even physically hurt ourselves, or whatever. It's not self-sabotage. We're trying to wake ourselves up out of our trauma-created fog.
Yeah.
We're
trying to move towards something.
We're trying to move towards something. We're trying to, the metaphor for, cutting even is that we're trying to get inside. We're trying to make sense. But then that becomes a pattern in its own because there's pain involved.
Yeah.
And it didn't work because this conversation isn't necessarily happening, but the drive is there, the desire is there. And I know because I've done 30 years of working with people in these situations. But once again, if you've got a driving trauma that's big and it's still hot, it's going to generalize, and it's going to be quite hard to do what we're talking about until maybe someone brings something up, or you pop out on your own. You go, wait a minute, I don't want to, and it starts with, I just don't want to feel like this anymore. But the next step is, I'm kind of, whether it's patterned depression or patterned anxiety or whatever, I'm still the one who's the operant. I'm still the one who's doing the process. And then you get into this whole argument, well, no, it's biological, and it's in you, and that's why we need to have a certain chemical. Sure. And I'll be first to put my hand up that I, for 9 months, 3 or 4 years back, I'd got myself into the state of, I couldn't create, I'm not dopamine, but the other one, the happy one.
I thought dopamine was the happy one.
Well, yeah, the dopamine. There's dopamine, and then there's the someone out there will know. But fundamentally, so I was on citalopram for 9 months, and because I worked through all the other possibilities with kinesiology and a doctor I was working with, and just couldn't find an alternative. Just could not find a vibrational alternative. And I was just in a fog, and it was just a combination of, I had a head trauma, really bad concussion. I had heat stroke, and a number of other, and that had gone on without me even knowing about it for a year. So I was not a good state, and this kind of pulled me out. And then I got to about 7, 8 months in, and I go, wait a minute, I'm good. And so I weaned myself off.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say, some of these things, but reason being was, if I don't know how to acknowledge that I'm doing the thing and then I don't have a tool structure or some kind of strategy or a person who can help me with those stress, because no, we talked about this a lot, you help me, then this thing will wire itself deeper and keep going. And then it becomes its own pattern, which then will, over time, or even reasonably quick, there's no kind of how long's a piece of string in this, that will become its own biological patterned structure. And that's when you need a crutch, you need a drug, you need a whatever. Some people are using psilocybin. 2 journeys of psilocybin can pull you out of monumental anxiety. And there's so much research into that.
Yeah.
Why?
So
Because
curious,
they were locked in.
Yeah, curious.
And this
about
takes
this.
them takes them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about whatever sort of trauma or emotional or mental
Serotonin. Yeah, so the
There it
opposite.
is.
So the dopamine, you can't create serotonin while you're creating dopamine. And dopamine is the antithesis, so it's like you can't be happy and sad at the same time. And
Yeah.
so the dopamine, I was in a dopamine fug. I was just overdoing the caffeine and the sugar, but I was also traumatized still by this, this. And so I'd gotten this pattern where I just couldn't create serotonin. And so this helped me kind of just re-trigger it slightly, got me into the wire, and then I was good. And that's, there are a couple other things which I can't mention that I added to that, but we talked about that. But
so I'm just curious about this pattern, whatever some unpleasant experience. And you mentioned the idea of a pattern becoming really, for want of a better term, hardwired.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, I mean,
what came to mind? Repetition? Is it just
yeah,
repetition?
well, totally. I mean, it's like, Tony Robbins. I mean, he's worked with the best sports people in the world, and, what is sport really? I mean, you watch a cricket batsman, he's waiting for a ball that's going to go at 140 mile an hour. You can't actually see it. Yeah, but you hit it, and you hit a 6, and then you run. He's not doing that consciously. It's pattern response because he has hit hundreds of thousands of bowls since he was a kid. People even bowl, and then, that's why the Pakistanis and the Indians are so good at golf at cricket, is since they were basically could walk, someone's throwing a cricket ball and they're hitting it. You can't consciously do these things. What? It's patterning. It's like I don't think about driving my car. I'm just suddenly at the supermarket, or I'm suddenly some. It's patterning.
Yeah.
Now, I can also pattern into that really bad driving behavior. But it's not until something happens or someone says, listen, mate, you're following so freaking close and I'm feeling really unsafe, that I'll suddenly go, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't aware of that. Or I'll go, yeah, screw you, mate, I'll drive how I like. So there's 2 ways to go.
Yeah.
So one's the compassionate or one's the other one. I tend to just go with the latter, which is screw you. I'm just going to, no, not really. But that's the kind of the wake up, you get you get a wake up. But that's how it's repetition. What was it Tony Robbins used to say? Repetition is the mother of skill. It's like you just get on the bike, you keep riding and then you test it out, and then you do really sharp corners, you fall off, and then you do it again. And it's like you watch these mountain bike guys, you watch Red Bull, and you go, wow, how did they do that? Well, they actually have been practicing that stunt. Can you see the tire marks on the ground? They've been practicing that stunt. They've broken bones practicing that stunt. They've fallen on their brains doing that stunt. And now they show it with a Red Bull sign.
So would it be
That's the
accurate
answer, I think.
Would it be accurate to say that feeling bad over extended periods of time takes a lot of practice?
It what?
Takes a lot of practice.
That's ugly, isn't it?
Okay.
It's
Poor
ugly.
choice of word, but at least it's a repetition.
It's repetition. It takes a lot of practice. I mean, I've worked with some people who are so good at feeling depressed. They are so good at feeling anxious, or they're so good at feeling motivated. They're so good at it. TikTok's full of it. Twitter, full of it. Or X, whatever it is. These guys that get on and they're just You know, you could, you know, how do you get abs that look like that? But seriously, they just, you know, they go every day and they stay 3 hours and they can do 5 million sit-ups. Well, great. How do they do that? Because they're pumped. They just want to do it. They want to, and they've got a meaningful outcome. And that's the other thing. The challenge with being in a repetitive pattern of depression or whatever is, and this is not a judgment. It's just the way, you know, it's just the way culture is kind of designed at the moment, is that there's a lot of very powerful feedback. A lot of very powerful feedback with respect to you can get financial help, you can get a lot of medical help, you can get all sorts of help when you are exhibiting these, you know, quite powerful symptoms. And yet most of the time, the people I see have been through that, and it hasn't alleviated anything. And they've suddenly gone, well, wait a minute, I just don't want to feel this, and I certainly don't want to be reliant on whatever the remedy that they've been given is. Yeah. So
let me throw this at you then.
Yeah.
If I'm digging myself into a deep hole of depression, anxiety, sadness, fear of loss.
Can I just, before you go into, I just want to make it really clear for all the listeners, where you and I are coming from, this is not a remedy. And where you and I are coming from is, this is a conversation about our own personal experiences when going through this ourselves and working with people who we have helped to alleviate their uncomfortable or whatever it is experiences. Okay, because there's people out there who become highly offended. There is no judgment towards anyone that is experiencing any of this stuff that they're having. None, zero, zip, because we've experienced it ourselves. We know what it's like, and yet we feel so extremely grateful for the fact that we've been able to help each other, but also because we've been able to tap into certain strategies and skills that others may not be able to. I just want to make that really clear.
Yeah.
Because this, you know, because there will be people going, well, yeah, but what are you saying about nothing. It's just, tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel very good. That's why we're having these, and you when you're in these states, you are not experiencing abundance.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's what we're coming back to. Sorry, just had to throw that in.
No, it's a nice disclaimer.
Yeah. Needs to be. It's just jokes, folks. Just jokes.
Excuse me. No, okay. My curiosity, and for me, this is very personal. People can do with it what they want. I'm very much open for people to experiment rather than rely on. Anyway, experimentation, I think, is the key. So, if I'm digging myself into a deep hole of depression or anxiety or fear of loss, that to me suggests there is motivation behind that. So do you get what I'm saying? So I'm making the distinction between what I'm doing and the fact that I'm actually motivated to do it. So there is an innate ability for me to motivate myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
So it's where do I direct that motivation?
Yeah. So just start with linguistically. I'm feeling concerned for the listener, and that is, when you say I'm digging myself deeper, many people say, well, I'm not, because I don't know how to do that. I'm just feeling depressed. Okay, so this is really important distinction. Many people that we've worked with, I speak for myself, most people I've worked with do not kind of have the capacity to think that it's I'm digging myself deeper into this concept. People feel depressed. That's it. It's later on, and that's what we were talking about a bit earlier, where we suddenly go, wait a minute, I don't like how this feels.
Yeah.
So when someone's in depression, like proper deep depression, it's a state that influences every capacity of their conscious ability to even access that concept, and they typically can't.
Yeah.
And it's really important to make that statement.
Yeah.
Because and regardless of what the cause is, how long it's been going on for, when someone's in that place, then that's their identity to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is some threshold, though, as you pointed out.
Of course.
Where the words come out, I don't like this.
Yes. And in that moment, there could be the question, so how do you know you don't like this? What's
What are you comparing to?
Yeah, what are you comparing to? Is there something else that you'd like? And then the question that comes up in a coaching kind of concept is like, have you ever noticed there are moments where you don't feel that way? Like is there a moment, like while we're having this conversation, because you've obviously kind of come out of it, we've kind of popped out slightly. Can you think of any moments, even a long time ago, where you just weren't feeling this way? And most people would kind of say, yeah, I kind of do. But the trouble with depression is that it can even filter that out because we're generalizing. Everything's bad, everything's dark, everything's hopeless. Sort of stuff.
Always was, always will be.
Always was. And that's the nature of that wiring decision.
Yeah.
So our job, I guess, or what this conversation is about is in that state, there is a feeling of what's the opposite of abundance again? What's that word? Scarcity. There's a scarcity of latitude of emotion. There's a scarcity of abundance. There's a scarcity of other feeling. There's a numb, depressed, hopeless feeling. And so in that, we're back to, there's that scarcity. And that's, that's where we have to be extremely astutely aware that that's the framework. And yet there are moments where there's that pop out. Wait a minute. And we all have it. So what I brought up was there was that sense of digging myself deeper. It's because in the New Age kind of vernacular, it's like, well, I'm doing this to myself and I should be able to, well, I'm not anymore, because it's in its own patterned, self-perpetuating. And if I'm in the context where that's the expectation, well, he's just depressed, from the outside, then that helps to kind of perpetuate that. But I'm not consciously and even unconsciously digging myself deeper. It's just the pattern in a neurological structured way, from what I understand, is growing. That structure is growing. The pattern is becoming more ingrained, potentially. And yet at some point, there might be something contextually, something someone says, something happens, significant emotional event where for a moment, we're just not there. We're out. We popped out.
Yeah.
We see something, we feel something, we smell something, and say, well, oh, wait a minute, I'm not in that state. And that's the light bulb that can.
Yeah. What's the difference, no matter how small, that disrupts something that's been a constant? So, and that's an introduction of, that's the tip of the iceberg. It's the introduction of abundance. If I'm doing this particular pattern, if I'm doing something habitually, what's that tiny little thing that snaps me out of that?
Yeah. Even for a moment.
Yeah. And as you say, it could be simple as, I really don't like this.
Yeah. And the trip is, and I guess it's what we're talking about. And it's our curiosity is that, well, if that happens, what do we do next?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what do we do next? And you asked it earlier, and I think it's like acknowledge that I just experienced something different. I queried myself, you know, and every major spiritual kind of movement, even, you know, Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, all these different things, you know, even the extreme versions, Tony Robbins, what's he doing? He's asking people to query their moment-to-moment experience, query their pattern. And, you know, he was the first civilian to be allowed, inverted commas, to do NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, back in the whenever 80s, 70s, 80s. And yet, and it changed his life around. And so you go, well, I can run with this. Well, what was it? Because it asked that self-querying question, but not in the form of, oh, why am I doing this to myself? Or why does everyone hate me? It was more about, wow, I'm thinking this way. And if I continue thinking this way and feeling this way, I'm going to keep feeling like shit.
Mm.
And that's the self-reflective query.
Okay, so to build upon that, what are your thoughts on if this inquiry is sort of spontaneous? Either I don't like this or I'm doing this. What do you think? What are your thoughts on using our vernacular, popping out and actually seeing myself over there and having a chat?
Well, what are your thoughts on it?
I've historically I've done it a lot, and I find it fascinating that it changes my state profoundly.
Yeah.
If I go to a position where I can actually see myself over there and have a conversation, it's not ideal, but it's very different to actually being stuck in my body, just having an experience, thinking, "How's this happening to me?"
Yeah.
If I change that to I can see myself over there, really curious about myself over there and
Yeah.
what's going on for him. So it's like having a friend who's genuinely interested, because I'm going to be interested in myself.
And that's the first step when you go, you know, when you do the self-reflective, and that's what, you know, apparently counseling, therapy, and all that sort of stuff is really there for, is at some point, hopefully, the person who's wanting help hears a meta explanation of their own state. Oh, you seem upset. Well, I am. Yes, and your upset seems to be, did you notice your hands wave around in a specific way when you're upset? Oh, no, I didn't notice that. Oh, well, they do. And then you demonstrate it, you know, reflective listening and body movement. And in that moment, they suddenly have a new self-reflective moment. And that alone, that can change a person's life.
Yeah.
You say to someone who's constantly depressed, look up, man. Just look up.
Have you noticed you're always looking down?
Yeah, if you're always looking down, it's actually how depression kind of continues to build its own structure as we look down. And then we have an internal conversation about how we feel when we look down. And that is an internal conversation, which is we're looking down.
And we're literally talking about looking downwards.
Yeah. So we kind of,
our eyes are actually facing, looking down there.
You know, when you study it, the eyes are generally looking down. And it's very hard. If you look up at the sky and try to feel depressed, it's pretty impossible to do because your brain's not designed to do that.
Yeah.
The brain-body system's not necessarily. There's always someone who goes, yeah, but I can feel real depressed while looking up. But, you know, literally, I've never met someone who can.
Yeah.
And often they'll start giggling. You know, but that's not to negate the authenticity and the importance. However, it is saying, well, you're not comfortable with this anymore. And they go, no, I don't like feeling depressed. Okay. Are you interested maybe in exploring some other ways of changing your state? And Tony Robbins talks about this a lot. And I've mentioned him a lot, but it's interesting because he's a generalist in a sense that he's over the years, and it's been 30, 40 years maybe, you know, he has successfully moved millions of people through his different technologies of generalizing certain models of success and just spreading the word. And he's often said, look up, man, and try to get depressed. You can't. It's a neurobiological function of how we're designed. But if you look at people who are, depressed most of the time, they don't look up ever. And that's my personal concern about looking down at cell phones. You're looking down at cell phones, trolling generally dopamine-based, miserable, frickin' doom scrolling stuff. Or with a little kitten in there now and then, bouncing on a trampoline or something. But fundamentally, goats on trampolines, it's still my favorite. But fundamentally,
goats,
goats on trampolines is hilarious. But fundamentally, if you want to laugh, but fundamentally, you're looking down, you're scrolling doom, or you're scrolling dopamine fixation. It's the same shit. And that builds pattern. If we keep doing the same thing over and over, that becomes the pattern. And if other people enable or the context allows and enables, whether it's community, culture, religion, whatever, political, no judgment, that's just the nature of it, then that will perpetuate and build the structure of that pattern. It's just the way that it works. And it's not science. It's just watch people. Just watch society. Watch the last 4 years. God.
Well, that is science. That's the observational part of science.
Well, I mean, that's true science.
Can we find pattern? Yeah,
it's true science. True science is observational. Test the observation and see how that works out, and then notice that it'll change again anyway, because we don't stay static ever. And that's why we have this conversation, because the framework of abundance versus scarcity is another way of maybe exploring happiness, health, value, all these different things.
Yeah. Well, I'd love anyone to play devil's advocate. It's just the way we've been talking about it. It just fascinates me. Are we seeing scarcity, whether purposefully or accidentally, being encouraged?
Oh,
Well,
here's the thing. If you're feeling stoked within yourself and you're feeling safe, you're feeling supported by your culture, your political structure, all that sort of stuff, you feel abundant. So are you going to go out and just consume the crap out of a whole bunch of stuff at the mall? You're going to be looking for movies all the time so you can laugh at other people's, voyeuristically laugh or experience whatever it is through other people's lives. Sure. I mean, that's, we've been doing it forever, where there's books or storytelling, whatever. But once upon a time, storytelling, let's say in a kind of like in a small community was around metaphor and learning, sharing experience. Now it's just, Netflix is making $18 a month off for everyone who's got a subscription. The mall, there's no clocks. You never know idea what time it is. You just keep walking around looking for the next lovely thing to buy. Oh, it's so lovely. I don't really need it, but it's so cute. That's because there's scarcity in my heart. There's scarcity in my system, and my state of mind tends towards fulfillment or resolving that scarcity. The thing is, it can't necessarily be resolved from the external. It kind of has to start somewhere inside, where I go, well, wait a minute. What do I have to do inside to just feel a bit better about myself or my world or my situation?
Yeah.
I'm just aware of the time. And then it came to mind right at the early stages where you said, because this is another strategy maybe, which might be useful to people. It's that classic, this means that. If I'm feeling this feeling and I'm suddenly aware of it, I'm feeling anxious, and I can go, well, I'm feeling really anxious at the moment. And I'm not sure what it's about, but I'm feeling really anxious. So I could say to them, because what the process in the general system of thinking is, well, this means that I'm feeling anxious, and so that means this is going to happen, this is going to happen. It's kind of a natural kind of progression. The sky is blue, and that means it's going to be a great day. You know, the road, there's no one on the road, and that means I can just relax and drive, whatever. You know, the surf is up, that means I can go surfing. There's these, this means that. There's biological ones. Oh, I'm feeling quite relaxed, and that means. So, but if I'm feeling anxious and I'm suddenly aware of that, and I'm kind of self-aware of that, and I don't like the feeling of anxiety, I could say, well, I wonder how this anxiety can now mean I'm even more inspired to relax about the future ahead. Because usually anxiety is only into the future, only exists in the future. It's about future real or imagined scenario. You know, like I'm feeling anxious about, I don't know, the climate. Well, I wonder how. I wonder how this anxiety I'm feeling about the climate can mean I'm even more inspired to make the most of today. You know, or my concern about going out to this party tonight. I wonder how that can, this feeling I have, this anxiety can mean I'm even more inspired to maybe just picture myself waking up in the morning smiling because it's all over, it's all done. You know, and then notice what happens, notice what the feeling is. So that this means that the subconscious doesn't really kind of query it. It just says, okay, cool, let's try that out. Because you're kind of making that scenario happen in your brain. And here's the thing, like if I can see myself tomorrow morning waking up smiling because it's all done, part of my brain is going, oh, okay, so we survived that. we survived this thing coming up. Okay, well, no, that feels better. It's stupid, but it's actually a part of our wiring.
Well, it's no different to imagining a future that's unpleasant. So you have the choice to imagine a future that's pleasant. So
yeah, why not? Why not choose it?
Why not?
You know, well, exactly. Well, the why not is because we've become patterned to believe that that's just how it's going to go. But when we become suddenly self-aware of this pattern, we can query it and then throw in an oppositional idea that, well, what if we survive this? What if we, and then what happens? Abundance occurs. So if my cortisol drops down because I picture myself tomorrow morning, wake up smiling because it's done, then my anxiety kind of drops down slightly or enough. And then suddenly my curiosity opens up because I might be able to start to query it at an unconscious level to, well, wonder if I can just relax at the party, or I wonder if I can maybe ask someone a question about themselves rather than just being obsessed with my own discomforts, you know, or whatever it is. You know, I might surprise myself with going, actually, this is actually not too bad. It's quite nice to just have a conversation with someone. And oh, I'm still alive. You know, I mean, you know, once again, this is not a judgment. It's just having worked in this field for 30 years. The weirdest scenarios that people do in their brains, which are really so fascinating. And going, well, how do you do that in your head?
Yeah, well, this is about playing.
It's playing. It's exactly right.
It's the spirit of play.
Yeah.
If I'm doing stuff habitually, well, what can I do differently? And just muck around with it and find out what happens.
And part of that is, unfortunately, but in the medium to long term, very fortunately, is discovering that kind of it's me doing it. It's just me doing it. You know, I even had this, you know, as you know, I had this terrible paraquat poisoning, you know, for years, and I had no idea what it was, and I was just so depressed. But one day I just woke up and I went, wow, I'm the one. I don't know what's causing this, but I'm doing this horrible feeling, and I don't want to do this anymore. So I started kind of presenting to myself alternative ideas. You know, what if I get through this? What if I survive? And then, but what I did, you know, I made an image of myself in the future, 10 years away, smiling. I did. I had a sense of, well, I'm going to get over this. I have no idea what it even is, but I'm going to get over it. And I made that image out in front of me. And I had to repeat that thousands of times, just thousands of times.
Yeah.
You know, because
what you're doing is you're tapping into something that's profoundly different to what you were doing.
Yeah, and it brought a sense of meaning where in the symptomology there was this lack of abundance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just
So you're tapping into possibility. This is where I'm going with
absolutely,
abundance.
absolutely,
This is where I'm going with abundance, and I
yeah,
love the way
yeah,
you give these little examples of how you can actually do that. That's where I want to go. How do we tap into this thing? Because we can talk about symptomology until the cows come home, and there's always a place for acknowledging that I or someone else is doing it tough,
mm,
and we can, offer whatever we can to, and it's usually 99%. I'm here and I'm listening. That's one
yeah,
of the
yeah, 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 yeah,
things we offer.
yeah,
And that to that person is a source of abundance that they might not feel they have at the moment.
yeah,
So totally acknowledge that we can help people in the moment. And the other side of that is, how do we tap into this abundance?
yeah,
What are the tiny little things that we can do? As you say, I just imagine myself 10 years down the track with a smile.
yeah. Why not?
Much more simple than that. And you're tapping into something. So
Yeah,
how do we
and
do that? How do we do that as
you wake up and just
way,
choose to
a
do
way
it.
of living?
Well,
How do we,
you've just got to choose to do it. I mean, choose to do that thing and then do it. And do it every single day.
Mm.
I don't need to, but I do it every day. I don't need to. I'm good, man. I'm great. I'm manifesting all sorts of wonders in my life, and and I'm stoked about that. I'm under no illusion that it'll continue the way it is. I'm under no illusion that there aren't, peaks and troughs. No illusion. And yet, cool. But I putting it out there,
Yeah.
delight and surprise
How do
me.
you do it? Can you give us some details?
Just
Can you give us,
decide. Just decide. I mean, I run a kind of a sense of having a future. I look out in front of me and I can see a future ahead, and I can see myself at the end of the week smiling, next week smiling. Partly because the week.
are you generating in context? Are you in a room? Are
No,
you on the
no.
beach? What?
Well, I can do if I want. I mean, usually I'm at the end of the week, I'm in my home.
Yep.
So I can see myself standing in the kitchen talking to my wife and just smiling and going, yeah, week's done. It's great. Done. It's more about non-emotional, non-judgmental. It's done. It's
Yeah.
just done. So
So
that
you're seeing Aaron.
I'm just seeing me.
You're just
Yeah,
seeing Aaron. You're
yeah,
observing this guy got a smile on his face.
yeah. And I see it little bit larger than life, a little bit brighter. So it's compelling.
Yeah.
But if it's something about abundance, maybe I want to earn some more, or I want to go overseas or some. For me, it's more. Here's my kind of take on this is, if I'm experienced delight and surprise, then good shit's happening. And I don't actually want to define too much about what I think in this moment that might be. I don't want to drive that hard. And the reason being is because in my present moment, let's hope I'm going to evolve a little bit more. In my present moment, I've got a limited capacity to know what the universe is capable of creating for me and what I'm able to create concurrently with it. That anything that I imagine right now is limited, because in the future, I'm not who I am. I'm hopefully a little more evolved, a little bit more knowledgeable, maybe a little bit more caring, loving, compassionate, whatever it is. That's my desire.
Yeah.
So in the future, if I'm experiencing more and more, momentarily or longer lasting sublime moments, where I've surprised or delight. I mean, I had that in Melbourne, mate. I went to Melbourne 2 weeks ago. I'm sitting there eating this meal. We won that trip. When my wife won the trip, we didn't know that was going to happen. Just the guy said, why don't you enter this competition? She goes, okay. Next minute, we're over there. But I had this meal that was part of the thing. I've never ever experienced food in that way. It's like, wow. I had a transcendental moment eating a meal, and all it was kind of mashed potatoes with shaved, smoked something on it, with the wine that was kind of balanced to the meal. And I'm going, oh my God, this is truly amazing. Now, I don't know if I ever want that again. And I know I never actually will, because if I ever had that again, I've already had it. So I'm gunning for more. Well, if that's what I can have, what else is available?
Yeah,
Because my taste buds have now evolved. My neural mapping for what is potentially possible to experience with food and flavor and texture and taste, coupled with apparently the perfect wine, white wine, which I do not drink, but I did, and it was like sublime with the food. I'm going, wait a minute. I literally stopped and looked at the waiter, and I said, I had no words. I said, I don't understand what's happening. Now so remapped my brain with respect to, I couldn't have planned that, Keith. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
A lot of people say, well, you've got to have a business plan. Sure, great, awesome. But fundamentally, if I only want to earn $500,000 a year, I'm limiting myself straight away. I'm limiting myself straight away. But I can see myself out there going, well, I didn't expect that. That's cool. That's amazing. I like that. But I don't want more of it. I want better. Now that's abundant thinking. Now the better is not necessarily the better is not necessary, because I've been helping a lot of people lately, and that's a huge privilege and a huge joy. But I still have no idea what I'm doing. And all I go, so I just want to help more people and feel good about it, and I want them to maybe feel good about it as well. And if there's something that comes with that, maybe financial or whatever, cool. But it's not the game. I just want to. It's just that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I freeze frame it too much, I'm not sure, because we're in an extremely exciting time in our history. We're going to look back going, geez, I could have actually designed more. I could have actually.
Yeah.
Because the one thing I'm learning from America right now, love it or hate it, love or hate the people that are doing it or not, 300 executive orders in the space of like 2 weeks. No one has ever seen that ever happen. And the stuff that has come out of that is both exhaustingly worrisome and, man, furiously fascinating is off the charts.
Yeah.
Because someone just said, well, let's just see if we can do this. Love it or hate it, with it or against it. It's exploring something that no one's been exploring in that part of the world for 100 years. And so we're going, I didn't expect. How many people are saying, I didn't expect that to happen? Now that can be good for some. It can freak a lot of people out, because
it's the essence of abundance, though, isn't it? It's something different rather than what's been going on and on and on forever. We can repeat ourselves ad nauseum.
Yep.
Our bodies crave, in fact, desperately need some sort of difference.
All the time.
And I love what you said before, because I'm trying to make this distinction all the time. Abundance isn't my wallet getting fatter.
Huh.
You said that's not part of the game. If the finances come in, fantastic. But I feel good at the end of the day when that person feels good, and I feel good that I've helped, and I feel good that I'm more knowledgeable and more skillful than I was before I met them.
Yeah.
That's abundance too. That's not about money. That's not about something.
No.
That's about a state.
I met someone for coffee this morning. Before this talk, I met someone for coffee. Well, no, I didn't meet them. I just turned up on my Vespa, because I manifested that out of freaking nowhere, and I got it for a grand cheaper. So much fun. Oh my God. Anyway, makes a hell of a noise, but I love it. Anyway, so I'm sitting at the cafe and someone turns up. Oh my God, I couldn't remember their names, but it didn't matter, because they know me, because I do a voluntary role, as you know. So I do this voluntary role. About 4,500 people know who I am. And just through whatever, and they start talking to me, and they said, and I said, listen, I've got to go. I've got this, thing with Keith, and something's burning out there, and there's a lot of sirens. Okay. Anyway, so suddenly, I'm getting up to go, and she says, listen, thank you so much for what you do. And I said, well, thank you so much. And I actually, as I say that, I just feel really, it's a privilege to help people, but that's not why I've been doing it.
The feeling is
and I didn't expect it. And it's just so that's where my community and I are in synchronicity. I'm synchronicity. And she goes, yeah, thanks very much for what you do. Because I just send an email and blah, 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 once a week or something and blah, 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 talk shit, whatever. But fundamentally, but to get that feedback, it was just, wow. And it wasn't elicited. I don't want it. But suddenly, and it was like, wow, okay, thanks very much. I really appreciate that. And it was a delightful surprise. It was momentary, but it was reflection that, part of putting it out there, and it's a lot about me in this talk at the moment, but, a lot about, forgive me, but putting it out there, but not really knowing how it's going to come back and not being attached to that financially or in kudos or whatever. It's not really, it's almost like just putting it out, but not giving a shit what comes back.
Yeah.
But knowing that what I'm putting out is, I believe it's time to have more delight and surprise in general, for everyone. And
it's a matter of how.
yeah, well, it's just do that. Just it's like standing with that kid who broke the femur. I'm standing, I have no idea what's going to happen next. No idea. I had no idea that I was going to say, really, we should be screaming louder because, Ward 3 didn't hear us. But the fact that it was a joke, but it was also kind of allowing. It was just allowing that it was okay that he was doing that. And he laughed. Yeah. And then weirdly, how's your other leg? It's like, no one knew how it went after that. Well, the family walked in. The family walked in literally 2 minutes later, the entire family. And he wasn't screaming his head off anymore. And everyone in the ward was quite stoked because he wasn't this horrific sound. And so the whole thing just kind of discharged. Why? Because something unique happened. We acknowledged where he was at. We just and it's with depression, very important. With depression, don't even say anything. Just sit with. Just sit with. Just sit with. Don't say anything. Don't need to. They know what's going on. You don't need to know. Just sit with. And at some point, the sitting with will lead to. And that's it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just we're at the time. We've got about an hour and 40 minutes that we've done here. Once again, not knowing what we're going to do. It's good.
Well, I don't know if we have time for it today, but maybe next time. I would love for you and I to go through the process of reducing attachment. So you present this model of seeing Aaron at the end of the week. He's got a smile on his face. He's talking to his lovely wife. He's done the week, and that's the state of mind that he's in. And the question are you obsessive about that outcome?
No. I honestly,
that's a fascination, not being attached to that. You've generated it. Number one, you've generated it. It's got a compelling aspect to it. There's no attachment to it. This fascinates me. This fascinates me.
Yeah, it was like I remember clowning with this because clowning is important. It's really because it's total connection with the unconscious, but also with extremely tight rules. Extremely tight. You're in a hospital, so you don't need to say much more. But I remember on that day, very well-known local street theatre person was clowning with me. She wouldn't come into the room. And when I said to the nurse, can I go in? She said, are you serious? I said, well, that's our job. And that's how I see it. This is my job.
Yeah.
This is the decision I made years ago. When I got over the paraquat and I, blah, 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 I got into NLP, all these, I said, well, this is kind of what I do. And sometimes I go, God, why am I doing this? But it was like, because I have no idea what I'm going to do next. There's no truth to it, in a sense. Like there's no truth to what I said to the kid, other than I just said this stuff and it had a response. But I could have said 100 million things. The person who I was with, she wouldn't come into the room when I went in. And the nurse was freaking out because what's going to happen? And I had no idea. But what I knew was at the end of the day, I'm going to have something really interesting to talk about. I'm going to have something really interesting to share. And I have no idea what that's going to be. And it could even be that it went really pear-shaped. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, I don't have any attachment to it because I
Mm.
don't know. But I'll tell you what, if the universe is listening, listen to that. And don't feel pressured, universe, to, I have to be wearing this and I have to be earning this much. Just because here's the gig. If I'm happy, it doesn't matter what's happening. It doesn't matter how much I've earned because it must have been enough. It doesn't matter who I'm standing with and having the conversation with. It must be great because I can picture myself a little bit larger than life, nice, colorful and bright, and I'm smiling because it's good.
Mm.
And no attachment.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah. And the game is keep doing it, keep playing it.
Yeah.
Whilst acknowledging the fact that you feel attached to the outcome. And then acknowledging that with, well, what is the emotion that glues me to that attachment? What's the emotion? And I think that's where we leave this conversation, because we could go on for another hour and a half.
So would you be keen to go through that process next time? Because
Absolutely. Write it down, because I haven't got a pen. Write it down.
Yeah.
And
oh, no, I want to do it. Oh.
Great.
It's going to be a wonderful conversation.
All right.
How to do non-attachment, because it's a fascination for me.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, Keith.
Thank you, Aaron. Always fun.
Yeah. And thanks, listeners. And what we'll do is, wherever we post this, wherever you're listening to, there'll be some links underneath to websites and emails if you want to ask us anything. So other than that, tune in next time.
Yeah.